So, Madeline Syambra Moitozo.
Yes.
This is my oldest friend, and not in terms of age, but in terms of how long I've known her.
Tenure.
Her tenure in my
Tenure.
life. And just to have a whole new relationship with her right now as a badass entrepreneur who is doing some really impactful work is really cool. And the fact that we can do some collaboration since both of our work kind of goes towards community support, you know? Um, as you can tell, I have a cold now. So
And I took this episode off. I wasn't part of this episode.
Oh, no.
So
Yes.
what are a few highlights?
Well, a few highlights are, I really wanted to ask her. I think she's really fascinating in terms of some like personal choices she's made to be her most authentic self. So I didn't want to jump straight into tell me about your business, tell me about your work, but I wanted to say like what is making you so authentic that your work is naturally spilling out of you. And I think that's a great lesson for everyone in our culture, So I really loved kind of getting to ask questions that I wouldn't normally ask her. And some more highlights is actually to be able to ask our community here how do you guys feel that we can collaborate? She's a storyteller, okay? She is a journalist. She's a storyteller. Our organization has a story to tell. And so there is a call to ask here. Call to ask? Is that
Call to action.
Call to action.
Action.
Ask. On how you think we should utilize her services. So I'm excited for everyone to listen. I'm excited for you to listen, Eric. And let's see what comes out of this. Please welcome my friend, Madeline. Welcome to Yoga for First Responders on Air, where we break down yoga, neuroscience, resilience, and public safety in a manner that's authentic, educational, and most importantly, entertaining and lighthearted. I'm YFFR's founder, Olivia Mead. As a yoga instructor and neuroscience enthusiast, I'm passionate about supporting first responders and anyone looking to improve their overall human performance. Each week, we'll dive into a new topic and often bring on expert guests to share their insights and experiences. But we'll also keep it real and share our own stories and struggles along the way. So whether you're a first responder or seeking to master the science of mental and physical resilience, this podcast is your ultimate guide to triumph over life's challenges with unbreakable strength and unwavering fortitude. By pressing play, your training has begun. Okay, welcome. My name's Olivia, and this is Madeline. And
isn't Olivier? That means Oliver, I think, in French.
Olivier, yes.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, Madeline, is that Madeline is your given birth name, first name, but it's not what I knew you as or called you by. And so you could say you've changed your name, but you didn't because it is your legal first name. And a lot of people do go by their middle name. Like that's a thing, especially if like they have the thing like, oh, we have, Uncle, Bruce gave us all this money, so we need to name our firstborn after him, things like that. But we're really going to call you Michael,
Right.
So tell us the story of your full name is Madeline Syambra Moitozo. I knew you as Syambra or Sy, and I'm bringing this up for a reason actually, which I'll get to. Tell me that journey of where you're like, I'm no longer going to be introducing myself as Syambra. I'm going by my first name.
Yeah. I will say before I answer that, I feel like another common name, I'm not sure if you did this, but a lot of people when I was very young called me Sy or little baby Sy or little Sy or...
I didn't call you baby Sy. I called you, I don't know if I called you Sy, but you're Sy in my phone.
And you know how iPhone said like you make your own contact and then
Yeah.
iPhone says you want to update the contact. And I was so sad because it did change it to your contact, which is Madeline.
Yeah.
There is parts what that does not acknowledge that in my phone. Like I refuse to acknowledge it and pops up as Sai Sai.
That's very cute. Yeah, so yes, so my parents named me after my Aunt Madeline, who was my dad's sister. Syambra was my great great grandmother on my mother's side, who, according to family lore, was
Witch.
French
No.
and Cherokee Indian.
Oh, okay. I said a witch? No.
A
Okay.
witch, probably.
A
I
witch.
mean, definitely in my background. I've definitely had past lives as a witch. We can talk about that later. But and so yeah, so and Madeline was someone that my father really respected. She was 16 years older than my dad and was kind of like a second mother figure to him. She was a nurse. They were very close. She died when I was maybe 12 or 11.
Oh,
And yeah, and then so anyway, so I was Syambra, which was shortened to Psy for most of my life, and then in my I want to say back in 2016, I went through a really like toxic situationship. I was starting out in journalism. It was like a combination of factors. Part of it was like that time in my life was so dark. For any listeners that can relate to like having a relationship that like literally feels like it like fractures your soul. I just was felt so detached and not myself, and sucked into someone who was really, really, really unwell. And yeah, and so I just wanted to separate from that part of my life, but then also I was working as a uh, associate producer at Vice Media at the time, which required a ton of like cold call research, trying to find things really quickly, calling, I mean, just you name the most abstract or bizarre locations. And so having a name like Syambra Moitozo as like a like, hi, this is Syambra Moitozo from Vice. Like it was just
yeah,
always
you're
like an
like coming in
issue.
hot with
Yeah,
this
I was like, okay, let me
very
spell it out for
difficult.
you, or
Yeah.
Sandra. I was just like, oh my gosh. So so that was part of it, and there was an alliteration of like Madeline Moitozo, and my Reiki healer, who you know actually was the one who originally had it like come through in a session.
Oh,
um,
really? I didn't realize that.
yeah, yeah, it was her suggestion or spiritual suggestion,
Right.
not her own opinion, but she's like, it's really feminine. She's like, I have a feeling it'll serve like your future path, which was for me ended up
Ooh.
being a lot about coming more into my femininity. I used to have a much more masculine presence than I do now.
Yeah.
um, and when I say that, I don't mean like I was, just for those who may not like be familiar with the feminine and masculine of from a
Not talking
spiritual
about penis vagina.
or butch lesbian or anything like that, but it was just very I was a lot more like harsh around the edges. I was a lot more people have called me like I was like a cupcake wrapped in barbed wire. That analogy has been made several
Oh,
times about me in the past.
okay.
So a lot of my growth and healing over the last, really 8 years has been about softening and about healing and healing from lack of, feminine nurturance or, whatever. And so yeah, so Madeline was a choice partly made for that.
One thing that just I kind of realized was I was talking to a police commander that I truly respect. He's one of the just the best leaders out there in a department in Colorado. And he was talking about hiring women police officers because public safety does require that feminine energy, that softness too, of you are
Yeah.
dealing with people, right? And but then what happened is because they're in a male dominated field, they had to harden up and get their masculine energy.
Yeah.
So it kind of defeated that intention of it. But I do know so many in public safety who have that nurturing energy. And when you encounter someone in emergency services or any in a helping profession, it's the bedside manner, right? That just so for example, like people always talk about the salty guys in public safety that's been there their whole
Yeah.
life. Meh, meh, meh. The reason they're like that is they had to put the barbed wire up
Hmm.
because of everything they've seen, right?
Survival, yeah.
it's shown that mostly empathetic people are those who go into public safety. And
Hmm.
so there was a guy at one of the departments where I taught and actually where I did academy, fire academy, and he was just, very stone-faced and just would tease you a little bit here or there. That's the only communication. But I saw him with a patient one time in an ambulance, and he was patting her hand, and she was kind of, I think she was like a drug addict. Like it wasn't like, oh, it's a sweet young girl, like little child that fell off their, no, it was
Right.
like someone who probably doesn't always get that kind of treatment. And he was patting her hand and telling her that she was going to be okay. And I was like, oh, there it is, right?
Yeah.
That's why people get into public safety because they have that softness, you know?
Yeah. It's funny. I was telling this to my sister the other day. I was on the bus I live in Manhattan, and I was on the bus going up the Upper East Side, and I was sitting next to two other women on this bus, and a man came on with his two kids, and the bus moved so quickly that they were standing in the middle aisle in front of us, so like right in front of us. There were enough seats, and as they were trying to figure out what they were going to do sitting, the bus moved, and both the kids kind of like fell a little bit, and all three of us women immediately went to like support them, and was like,
Yeah.
I didn't know any of these women. We didn't know the guy and his kids, but I was like, oh my gosh, there really is, and not to genderize, like everyone is unique and different, but you do see sometimes these yeah, feminine instincts of like protect children, or like, put your
Yeah.
hand up them. And someone told me this, that like they train their kids that if they ever got lost, not to look for a police officer, but for look for a woman,
Yes.
because
So
women are going to like are by and large trustworthy and will know what to do. And I thought that was
that's
such an
what
interesting
a
thing.
friend of mine said to her kid too, is go find a mommy. Like if you
Hmm.
get lost in the mall, go find a mom and she'll help you out. And
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely feel it having a child now myself. I definitely feel this. I feel differently towards children. I do have to say that. It's very interesting and um yeah, and we see it in love for pets and
Yeah.
things like that too. So your identity, so what is your relationship identity with the name Syambra now? How do you feel about it?
Yeah. There's sometimes I kind of miss it because it's so unique and it's kind of exotic. Sometimes when I tell people that, they're like, oh, you should, oh, I wish that's so cool and unique. And but I'll be honest, I'm not gonna like broad strokes anything, but like there was a lot parts of my younger life that were really difficult. A lot of
Yeah.
loss, a lot of death, a lot of trauma. So in a way, it kind of feels appropriate to like have put that to bed. And Madeline, gosh, it's now been since 2016, so 8 years, right, of me using this name now. So it feels most people in my life now have never, you're like one of the very few people that's in my life now, other than my direct family members that even had that identity for me. So
Yeah.
many people that I'm close to now don't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, but it feels, perfect. And it feels weird sometimes writing it, like if I have to do like a full, signature for something. But yeah, I think it's all about chapters. Also, I'm, as you know, I'm very into astrology and things like that. And I have a ton of Scorpio in my chart, and Scorpio is all about death and rebirth and transformation.
Yeah.
So it's like I do honestly feel like I've lived many distinct lives in this lifetime, and coming into a new chapter now even. So it kind of feels appropriate.
I also think there's a tie back in there for our audience who are first responders, because a lot of times when they leave the job, whether it's an injury or they retired or whatever, there's this loss of identity. And that's
Yeah.
why, there is a high rate of suicide after retirement because this is all they've known. They don't even know who they are anymore. So, and this is something Eric is super passionate about because he left the job. He felt that loss of identity. My dog is here. Speaking of dogs and loving dogs, he's chewing the outdoor plant I have. It's a puppy, everyone. So
Okay.
I always talk about the mind being a puppy and like you have to train it to sit and stay. And I'm truly living that metaphor
Yeah.
in my life. Philippe, come here. Um, so Eric, felt that loss of identity and missed the truck and all that stuff for a long time. So he's very passionate about supporting first responders when they leave the job and finding their next chapter. So if we introduce it in a way of was a chapter, this was a season, this is your next chapter, and
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting way to approach it. And I actually feel the same way about my last name. So I've had three
Yeah.
last names.
Yeah.
And when I got divorced, I did not want to go back to Good, which was my birth last name, my maiden name, I guess,
Did you
because
never like it or
did I ever like it?
yeah,
I'm
your last name?
neutral.
Okay.
I wouldn't go as far as saying I liked it, but like, um, it was, it held a lot of family pride because we have a big family and, everyone in Westbury, Long Island knew the Good family. And when I was little, go there, walk down the street. They knew by my face that I was a Good.
Right.
There's a lot of that. But same with you is I wanted my own identity and I wanted my own, and especially after my divorce, where, okay, who am I now? You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going back to where I've been. And so Mead was already a middle name I had, my grandmother's maiden name. So my whole name when I was born, Olivia Elizabeth Mead Good. So and then replaced the Good when I got married, and then when I got divorced, dropped that. So just Olivia Elizabeth Mead. And I didn't change it to Eric's last name, primarily because it's a real pain in the ass to change your name. And
Mhm.
you didn't have to deal with that because it was your legal name,
So
right?
my license, my driver's license is exactly the same.
Yeah, okay. So let me tell you the pain in the ass it is to change your name. Okay, and I've done it twice and I'm still battling with the passport issue, like it's crazy. And I just told Eric like I don't want to go through that again. He's like, I don't blame you. But also I like having a different last name than my husband. I am my own
Yeah.
person, you
Right.
know.
Right.
So
Totally.
anyway, that's interesting with that identity. How do you feel when someone in your life who knew you as Sai calls you Sai?
Um, I don't go home a lot anymore, and I don't. The only two people I have two really good friends that I've known since kindergarten. Um, and they call me Sai, and it's like it's like kind of appropriate because they're from that time of my life, so it's fine. My family has pretty much all adapted, but it took them quite a while.
Okay.
But like my sisters definitely call me Madeline now. Yeah, it's like just it's so infrequent, and even if they do it, they call me Sai. No one says Syambra for the most part. So yeah, it's just like not it's not a non-issue. There's never been any like people refusing or the only thing that would be really annoying is like someone who I know isn't lives in New York and I've known for a long time and they know that I've changed my name and like still call me Sai. But yeah, I think I've also just grown so much in self-love over the past few years, especially this last 6 months. That like I think it used to maybe be a bit triggering, like feeling like a lack of control or power over my autonomy, and now it just doesn't mean anything to me. So
Mm. Yeah, it's funny how things like trigger you less the more you have that self-love.
yeah,
You're like, whatever, like, no, it's really hard to offend me anymore because
yeah,
like, you know, um, and yeah, I mean, I make a point when I introduce you to other people, I introduce you as Madeline, or if we're
yeah,
in a professional setting. But when I'm talking as a friend to you and I'm passionate, I'm talking on the phone, I'm like, you wouldn't believe it, Sai.
yeah,
Like that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
comes out because that's who I'm talking to. I'm talking to my lifelong friend, and it
yeah.
just comes out in this natural way. So,
Are you gonna tell the viewers that
what?
about how long we've known each other?
I was gonna put that in I
Okay.
will
Oh, and in the preview.
know,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
but actually the whole reason that I even brought up your name, well, several reasons, because it has to do with identity and stuff, but also this is not our first podcast together. I don't know if you recall, but when we were younger, I can't even guess what the ages were, under 10 for sure. Um, I had this little recording device from the 1980s with a little microphone, and we went to our church camping trip and we were interviewing people and interviewing each other, and we were doing like a radio show. And my favorite part was how you introed yourself, and was, "Hi, this is Sai." And I always love that. "Hi, this is Sai."
Oh my gosh.
So,
I
yes.
think your dad gave that to me on a like a DVD or something, and I have a home DVD player, so but I would love to listen to the whole thing. I will say, I you were one of the most creative friends to have as a kid. It was just like I think all we ever did was create together.
Mm.
Dances, choreographies, cooking, baking, bake sales, plays, apparently podcasts.
Yeah.
I remember and so much video stuff with your dad, which was so cool. But I remember one time, it must have been a birthday party because there were other kids there at your house, and we did this scene on the Fountain of Youth. Do you recall this at all?
No.
It was some kind of like there was a storm drain, like the kind that you could kind of crawl under and out of near your house if you're a kid. And
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do remember
I
that.
basically we framed it so that like you were already in the storm, no see.
Oh my God, I remember now. I remember.
Tell me
Oh,
what you remember.
I went in and you came out.
Yes. And
Oh,
we're like, it's the fountain of youth or the portal of youth or something.
do you know what's so funny is you know how like if you hadn't mentioned that right now, it would be
Yeah.
forever gone in my like I
Yeah.
would never remembered it. I feel like between the two of us we can piece together
Whole
like
parts of our brain can come back. Yeah.
childhood stuff. It's nuts. And so um here we are as adults and in our 40s.
You're not in it for me.
I know, like she's got a few more weeks.
I've
Um,
got like,
but you're obviously my oldest friend. I have maybe one friend, my neighbor from where I, grew up, who I'm in touch with. One girl from elementary school that I'm Facebook friends with.
yeah.
But that's it. And so it's so interesting to see because when I look in your eyes and I see you and I see this adult that you are and all the wonderful things that you are, it almost does, like I said to you the other day, was it when oh no, it wasn't you, it was someone else that a high school friend, but like when you say these amazing things you're doing, I'm like, what are you talking about? You're only 6 years old. You can't do that.
Totally.
And it's not it's just because that's who you are in my heart always,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
so interesting to see you as this full-fledged person. So, uh
Yes.
tell me like I'm gonna go now front and we're gonna go backwards. So right now we kind of rebonded
Mhm.
basically because we're lady bosses, right? We run our own businesses.
Mhm.
That was one of the things that kind of brought us together, several
Mhm.
things. But how did you get there? So your business is Juniper Media. Can you,
Mhm.
what's what is the line of this is what this business does?
Yeah. So Juniper Media is a creative, well, I would say Juniper Media is a social impact driven creative agency, meaning that we really have the intention for the specific types of services that we offer that impact audiences in a positive way. Um, uh, I can't say what we do without doing a little bit of a background in that I was a journalist before I started this
I
company.
was gonna say, so how did that come? How did this cake? What's the recipe
Yeah.
of this cake?
Yeah. So I will say, like, since I was a little kid, speaking of little kids and our childhoods, I always wanted to do something meaningful. Like the word meaningful is just like so ingrained in my being. I think that I remember watching those like ad council ads of like, this is your brain on drugs, and the egg in the pan.
Yeah.
And there were other ones that I thought were so fascinating when I was like, "Wow, I want to like impact people through media. That's so cool." And then, you like grow up and you forget, and then something happens, you remember you're supposed
Forget,
to
yeah.
happen.
You forget your
Uh,
purpose. You start
yeah,
smoking,
exactly.
and then you're like,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, I through an absolute miracle, like I wasn't even wanting to be a journalist, not because I didn't really want to be, I just didn't think it was on the table because like I don't know any journalists and that just seemed like an impossible thing to do. And so I did my master's in international affairs. And I had lived in West Africa before I moved to New York. So I had been working in international development and humanitarian aid, and I thought the next best thing is to be able to help people who, you know, help create communications that bridge gaps. I thought that was cool, and then I got this internship at NBC at 30 Rock, and then got a job there and started producing news for a overnight news show, which I highly don't recommend for anyone who cares at all about their mental health because it's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I
But
also did an overnight work. I was a cocktail waitress in Vegas on the graveyard shift, and I still like I have to go back and do real like personal work on that time and why I allowed myself,
yeah.
in that environment, but that's a whole other episode. So go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, I think it was absolutely a necessary step because it got me my first, news media outlet on my resume. That I lasted 5 months before I just crumbled. But that led to a job at Vice Media as an associate producer, where I started writing as a journalist and got my own bylines, my name on articles, and I was writing on Steve Wozniak and growing up with him and having him be my computer teacher in Los Gatos in the 90s, and started writing on transgender issues and human rights issues. And I got to go to Bangladesh and went to Southern Africa and report on climate change. I was just doing all these really cool things. And I was paid so badly, so poorly. And I think there was a certain a part of maybe immature pride of just like, I deserve better. I'm going to go on my own and I'm going to freelance and make more money, and made way less money that way. And I think I'm so big, as you'll see if anyone checks out the campaigns on my page, but we do a whole campaign on gender pay equity with Indeed, about why pay transparency is so important, why you should be able to ask what someone's salary is, why you should share your salary, because so many people are underpaid and they just don't even know that they should be asking for more because we don't talk about it.
Mhm.
But I think I was paid like $40,000 a year to work for Vice Media as an associate producer,
We're living
uh,
in New York.
living in New York City. Yep. I also had like $70,000 of grad student debt that I was not paying off the first years because I couldn't afford to. And then, went freelance, and that next year made like $23,000 a year. Of course, I was also like farm sitting in Costa Rica for a friend and not paying rent. I just became like this like very, very nomadic before COVID, and before like digital nomad was such a big thing. Um, anyway, and so totally like by divine intervention, I had no desires or ideas to start a company that would feel so overwhelming and out of reach for me. Um, but someone that I knew from my childhood also uh, ran a production company in San Francisco that was doing really well, and they were doing a campaign for the 20th anniversary of Google search, like the button.
Oh.
Yeah. And they asked if I would do some story finding, find real stories of real people who'd been profoundly impacted by pressing that button.
Ooh, I did. I'm one of those people. I mean, I didn't do it, but I'm like, I
Yeah.
wish you could talk to me because that's why I started yoga for first responders. That is part of like when I tell my story or in my presentations, I say I Google searched yoga for first responders.
There you go.
Nothing popped up, so I knew I had to make it.
Yeah, that's so
Now, when
cool.
people say like, how did you find, I say, how do you find us? I say I Googled yoga for first responders. So
That's so cool, full
definitely
circle.
the Google search button is
Yeah.
definitely part of my history. So
Well, funnily enough, I interviewed someone from our fellowship, Rebecca Sheldon, for it.
oh, really?
Yeah, because
Okay.
her grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and they ended up finding the person that like smuggled out her grandfather in Europe and met him, and it was like this really moving experience.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Um,
we'll have to talk more about that
yeah.
after. But yeah.
So I was really good at it because when you work for Vice Media, you had to be just ridiculous at finding the most bizarre, obscure, unheard voices, creative approaches, angles, because that's what Vice was. It was like super cutting edge. It was pull back the veil. It was subcultures. It was tight deadlines. I worked on a daily show, and so it was just a really good natural match, like of finding and telling real stories that make an impact. And that's our tagline for Juniper Media now is uh what is it? It's like real stories for real change, or telling real stories, telling real stories to inspire real change.
Okay,
Cut
there.
out cut out the rest of what I just said. It's
This
just
is why, everyone, for as impressive as my friend Madeline,
yeah,
sounds, it's these little goofy moments that we have that
yeah.
is why I love you and that we would just
Why she
laugh
keeps me around.
at each other.
Um,
When you were visiting me a couple years ago and we were in the car and you said, "How did I get here?" Do you remember that? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, is this an existential, like,
Right.
are you having a brain like issue? Like, what's going on? She's like, no, I just don't even remember like how we, you know, like booked the ticket or got here or whatever, but
Oh
just
yeah.
like that. But just we started laughing, like, how did I get here?
Where am I? That's really funny. Yeah, so yeah, and so anyway, so we became over time. That first project was Google, and then Lyft did a campaign in response to Trump's ban on immigration from Muslim countries.
Oh.
If you guys remember that, he banned people from immigrating to the U.S. from 13 majority Muslim companies during his presidency. And Lyft wanted to do a thoughtful response to the importance of immigration and diversity in our country, especially to the gig economy like Ubers and Lyfts. And so I flew to Dearborn, Michigan, and interviewed people who worked for the gig economy and who came from that background. And it was really cool. And then I worked in the longest client we've ever had was Indeed, and worked for them on retainer for 5 years, which was incredible. And I started by just doing one video that was how finding a job on Indeed changed someone's life.
Mhm.
And we ended up doing 5 or 6 of them. One on a girl who grew up in foster youth, and she was working at a shoe store and really having a terrible time of it, and then found this job through Indeed. Um, that was an agency that helped older foster care kids who are over 18 get adopted. And you would think,
Wait,
and it wasn't just over 18.
you get
Huh?
adopted at over 18?
Yeah, because you can get assigned. If you think about it, like having a legal guardian, if you get sick, if places to go, if you're, uh, um, you know, someone to have Thanksgiving with, and people need family, like beyond their legal adult age. And it wasn't, I want to correct myself, it wasn't just 18, but it was people who are kids who are older,
Okay.
because the vast majority of people are getting adopted, 3 and under.
Yeah.
And so they focus on children and young adults. But there's lots of reasons why you still need a parent when you turn 18.
There is? No, I get it.
Um, as strange as
I
that
was
might sound
perfect.
for
At 18, I
I
was off. I knew what I wanted to
right,
do.
exactly. Highly
Earned
independent people like you and I. Yeah.
$100.
Yeah, I do think it's so fascinating that you and I we were so close when we were young. Then you went off to high school, and I basically, other than the times I visited you in North Carolina, I didn't see you really for 4 years. And then I surprised you one summer in New York City when you were doing a
That's
dance.
right.
And I must have been, I think I was like a junior, maybe a junior. So you were, yeah, just graduating. But we didn't really have contact for a long time until COVID, when you started really selling the candles. But we got our personalities and some of our cadence is similar, but also just our life path has become, we're like those twins separated at birth, and then they both marry people who look like, have you seen those stories about, oh, there's these stories of identical twins who are separated at birth, and then they end up going and like having very parallel lives without influence from each other. It's
Great
so
nature
interesting. I'll find
versus
that for you.
nurture. I actually
Yeah.
do remember a phone call with you when you were heading to Africa. It was
Mm.
like you were like even driving to the airport, like your
Oh,
mom was
interesting.
there, and I was having a phone call with you because I had just gotten engaged or something like that. Anyway, so but I do remember that I don't know, that's a very core memory for me.
Yeah. And then you got married right when I got back from Africa.
Okay. The
Yeah.
first time, folks, the first time,
First
right?
time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, right? Did you get married in 20
I
what?
got married the first time in 2011 and I had a wedding in 2012.
2012. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I got divorced and then got married again in 2020.
20. Yeah. So anyway, so Juniper Media, our main goal, we are a creative agency, but we really focus on finding and telling real stories, to bring more of a journalistic approach to campaigns, which builds trust. We have both an advocacy arm and a brand arm. So advocacy, we work with organizations like the Environmental Defense Fund. We've worked with, voter education organizations, a lot on climate change. And then on the brand side, a lot with tech, and we're kind of venturing into beauty and sports too. But There's just, especially as influencer campaigns get bigger, as AI gets bigger, actors are always obviously a mainstay for scripted campaigns, but we've just noticed that there is a real pull and desire for more real storytelling and people being able to see themselves reflected in campaigns and telling more intimate stories of people who don't have a million followers on Instagram, who aren't paid a ton of money to represent something, who are just sharing their genuine experience. But because we have the journalistic expertise, we know who to capture, how to capture, them in a way, how to make them feel safe talking about sensitive subjects, and how to capture that in a way that really resonates with people to either buy a product or a service or internal, even like we've done internal campaigns with companies that educate their entire employee base on their social impacts or their climate change commitments or whatever by sharing real stories of people who work there.
Mhm.
And that takes something to do that well, and I'm grateful that we have the skill set to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that is your zone of genius. That
Yeah.
is what you know how to do. And so when you to go back to even before Juniper, when you were doing like the stuff in South Africa and things like that, when you knew about issues from an outside lens, okay, and then you actually went in the trenches. Did you discover things like, oh shit, I didn't realize this X, Y, or Z that the common person wouldn't know unless they were there and doing it? And the reason I ask that is um because we've talked about this with first responders and law enforcement, especially, that there's something that the like a game of telephone or what the general
Mhm.
public think or whatever. And then when I went in the trenches, right, when I went in an academy setting, when I went into the departments, there was so much more I learned that I had no idea about. So did you have any of that when you went to work in these places that needed support?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like part one and part two because I lived in West Africa for 14 months. So, coming off of, I had people saying, worried about my well-being and don't get sick while you're there, referring to AIDS, things were just like kind of ignorant. And kind of viewing, there's such a popular view of what a lot of people say are third world countries. I really encourage folks with that terminology to not use it. Instead of, you could say the global south, developing countries. There really is um, like a hidden context to saying third world as like less than because they don't do things the way that we do, or maybe they aren't as developed, right? And so, and without getting too much into the history of it, when Europe colonized Africa, it set up this really unequal power imbalance, right? And um, aside from religion being spread and other things like that, which unfortunately in some cases have caused like horrendous issues of like making being gay illegal or other instances of homophobia or hatred or danger to people of different sexual orientations. But there's just this tends to be this like view of the global south as less than, and then unfortunately a lot of people there agree with that, meaning that they've put Americans and the West on a pedestal
Mm.
and then lose a lot of their efficacy and self-sufficiency for being resourceful themselves. So
Mm.
you see it a lot. Like when I lived in West Africa, I worked for a nonprofit that helped uh, women take up micro loans so that they could start their own businesses, which is so cool
Oh
because
my
a lot of them are
God.
dependent on husbands or low income. Obviously, income's a big issue there. And a lot of them did receive a lot of empowerment and self-sufficiency in doing that. I also taught at a school a couple days a week. I went back 10 years later. It was great to see the kids. They were 6, 7, 8 when I taught. Now they were 16, 17, 18, going off to college in some cases, which is wild for the area that I was in, that they got to do that. And one kid that was like one of my best students, I discovered that his mother had had a stroke. His father was not in the picture. So I offered to help him get through high school, which you have to pay for. There are fees associated with a lot of things in public education, in West Africa at least. So uniforms, you still have to have a public school, books, just other school fees, and really hard for a lot of people to stay in school. So I paid for that to help him get through school, thinking that like, okay, great, I'm going to help him get out, and then he's going to be on his own to figure out college or whatever. I ended up getting an anonymous donor for his college education, which was like not my plan, but I just kind of fell in my lap. And I kind of thought that was it. And what I realized soon after was like there was never going to be an end to the need. Like there was always something that he needed that was, he got sick, or he needed additional school fees, or he lost his phone, or his laptop broke, and it was just like I ended up having to have really strong boundaries around what would be what I was available for, but then also like what I assumed he would start to be self-sufficient in, or do his own research in, or whatever. It was a mindset issue. So I will say maybe it's hard because I'm like, well, now that I'm saying this, I think it's kind of proving the point that there is like a dependency, but when we can start viewing, my main point is when we start viewing people as equal to us, that's what can help us shift those narratives, right? That they aren't poor, victims. Like the victim, and you and I have talked about this. There's a really amazing woman named Lynn Forrest. She's a educator and a psychologist, I think, but she has this incredible book on the victim triangle, which is like that we can view people, right, as victims, and then we're the rescuer, which is like really not about them. It's about us feeling good and important. Or you're the perpetrator, which walks around the world not feeling safe. So you're, the offense thinking you're defense. So just like learning how to see people as, honoring their capability, supporting, at the end of the day, I don't know if it was a good idea that I did all those things, because I don't think at the end of the day it really helped him that much. Like
Right.
I'm not in communication with him anymore, because it got to be so like there was no respect of the boundaries I put in place, and eventually it was just like I can't, um do this anymore. But yeah, like it was really unfortunate that I thought what I was doing was helpful, and I don't think it was helpful. I think that it was the handout was not actually.
I want to pause you right there because, with people's view on public safety, gosh, there's so much mirror to what you're saying. A lot of people put public safety, firefighters and stuff on a pedestal
Mhm.
as being superhuman, always able to help, right? Then they take that on in a way of I can't go get support for my mental health because I'm viewed as the hero, right? So I
Right,
have to
right,
maintain
right.
that. So the second, then that's also going with like it's also the responsibility of us as the public, right? We're putting it on them. Why don't you go get mental health? You go do this. No, as the public, we have to shift our perspective of public safety as people just like us
Yeah.
have the same brain and nervous system. And then the other thing you said about, helping actually just continue to perpetuate the issue. One of the biggest stressors, my husband, Eric, told me about, and I hear it from a lot of public safety, is what they call frequent flyer callers,
Mm,
saying that they pick up the same homeless person, they bring
mhm,
them to the shelter, they pick up the same drug addict, they take them to the hospital over and over, the same domestic violence
mm.
victim
Yeah.
over and over. They see the same thing, that they go in just like you did. They go into this profession to help. They go in because they want to help and support people. They go in with these open hearts, and then they realize, I don't think I'm helping. I don't think this isn't helping. You
Mhm.
know, like Eric described it as he was basically the Uber to
Yeah.
take the homeless drug addict to the hospital
Yeah.
every other
What's
week, you know?
Yeah, and what's really interesting too, though, is I don't think that doesn't mean at the same time that these places don't deserve attention. And there's amazing, I can tell you super sad stories about my time in Southern Africa and I did a story set on um Lesotho, which is a country completely encircled by South Africa. It's like a freckle on South Africa. And I went there for two reasons. One, it's the second highest HIV rate in the world, and 1 in 4 people are HIV positive there. High death rates, super, super sad. Um, but then you have other places like Rwanda, which we all know as being a place of, genocide. They are like a booming tech industry there now. Talk about resilience. Yeah. Yeah, like amazing things, amazing stats around women being empowered and economic development and private sector development. So like I think, now the older I get, the more I'm like, oh, like maybe it is about private sector development. Maybe it's not about, and I'm not saying there's one right answer, like whether you're talking about aid versus, investment in the private sector, but there's a lot to be said for a lot of amazing, inspiring things happening. And I think for me, the biggest thing is not treating people as victims, no matter what we're doing.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%. Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is I always say about our approach with YFFR, don't approach them like they with kid gloves,
yeah,
like they can't handle their shit or whatever. We
yeah,
teach our training like training. We expect
right.
high performance, we expect discipline, because, and it's kind of like your feeling of like investing in the private sector. It's not been a popular opinion to, it feels like mental health, you have to be like a softy, wafty, whatever. We're approaching it more as like, this is proactive training. You need to approach it like any other training that you do. Um, and it's almost that equivalent of like, yeah, we're going hardcore investing in the private sector to boom stuff up and create
Yeah,
opportunities. So it's looking at the problem from a different angle.
totally. And I think this is more also like a um, like talking about being an entrepreneur and deciding where we put our energy. I think as I've evolved as a business owner too, it's like investing in things now that I'm kind of stepping away from my own and healing my own victim mentality, where I had that in my own life and reflected that into the world around me, focusing on things that I feel really excited and inspired about, focusing on things that bring me joy, focusing on things that light me up, and doing that within the company, and getting that it doesn't mean I'm a bad person because I'm no longer focusing on these, heavy issues, and I'm not,
Oh,
I'm shifting that,
do
you
you
know.
feel like sometimes like how we were raised, and also for Google this if you need to, but we were raised in the Unitarian Church Fellowship, and sometimes I feel that that demographic is very focused on the big issues and stuff. So being raised in that kind of environment, doing anything for yourself or that brought you joy felt wrong.
Mm,
It's like, no, your life. I kind of felt that it's the people pleaser thing, is like, I heart of servitude. Yeah, I want bleeding heart. I want to focus on these big issues. And I was sad, just
mhm,
sad all the time. And so same is that like, and I would think it'd be the same also for public safety, is when they see such horrible situations, they don't even feel deserving
mm.
of what we're bringing them. Like, we're bringing them, you can take your stress and turn it into resilience. You can have a life that's worth living. And I feel like subconsciously they're like, but look at these people who are,
Right. Why? How could I? Yeah.
yeah, why should I have that?
Yeah. I feel like it's a double-edged sword. I mean, not to like psychoanalyze you. I think I would guess that most of that comes from your upbringing more than it does from the church that we
Yeah.
were in, because I think, I mean, our church barely call it it was barely a religious
Oh,
institution.
they were all afraid of the word God. They were well, most people were like, turned off by whatever religion they were raised in,
Right.
came to create, they're like, oh, we want to have, they literally wouldn't call it a church, they called it a fellowship.
Right.
And they did not want to hear about Jesus. They didn't want to hear about God or anything. And even the Unitarian actual churches that I visited around the country are way more, um, tying in religious,
Agreed. Yeah.
than
Yeah. The
our.
specific congregation that we went to was a lot of people in their 60s and 70s. There was a fairly large family base because we would have our own kind of what was like children's time in the beginning of service, and then they'd sing that song, "Go now in peace."
Now in
Now
peace,
in peace,
bear
may
a
the
halo
spirit.
away
No,
from us. No, that wasn't it.
no. It
Okay.
was may this. Hold on, I have to sing it
May
now.
the spirit
Spirit
of
of
love
love
surround
surround
you
you
everywhere.
everywhere, everywhere you may
May go.
go.
Now, listen, guys,
That's a
that
creepy
word
song.
that you just heard, I want you to imagine that so the first part of the service we were in with the adults, we had the first part, and then they're like, okay, children, come down at the front, we're going to read you a story or whatever, now go. And all the old people in the congregation would sing this song as we had to walk up the aisle and out, and it was like horrible. Like it was
They're kind
humiliating.
of creepy.
And
Yeah.
I remember when you and I kind of were old enough to catch wind of how like dumb this was, we would run. We would be like, get out of here before I don't
We're
want you to
going.
sing me this song anymore. Oh my God.
So
So
funny.
yes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that my parents at least brought me because they wanted me to have a community and they wanted to have a place that I was supported, and there was a lot of love. There was a lot of lovely, loving, supportive people. You
Oh,
know,
and I'm
Julie Doyle
still,
and Katie right, exactly.
yeah,
And
they're my family for sure.
yeah, so and then we were, really raised in a supportive, loving congregation, and I really loved the part of the service where people could express their joys or concerns in the beginning and get either, get have people celebrate with them or mourn with them. It felt like a lot of people dying all the time because they were all really old, so we just got used to like constant death, and losing
Yeah,
people.
God.
But I got to sell my Girl Scout cookies there, and we did Halloween parties, and
Oh,
my
how,
favorite part was like the refreshments out on the deck after
oh
service,
my
and I'd go
God,
make
those were
my tea
so
or hot chocolate or
loved
whatever.
it. Yes.
And of course, there's you have to incorporate this if you do any audio or video components, but there's many great years of pictures with you and I and the Easter
Oh, I
Bunny.
was thinking that I would definitely, when we post this on our social, add a couple past pictures. My dad tells a story, and he was telling this, or I don't even know how he knew it because he was never there, but um, and he told the story because of how like he describes you as someone who knows herself,
Mm.
and like solid in herself. That's how you always appeared to him. And he was like, for example, like if in the little Sunday school, if they asked her to clean something up, she'd say, "No, thank you." And I kind of have that memory of like, "Sai, do you want to clean up the blocks over here?" "No, thank you." Just like, no, I don't. You asked a question and I'm answering it. I'm not being a dick about it. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, like, no, I would prefer not to. Wait, there are
I
packs on the deck.
decline. It's so funny. I was last time I was home, I was going through some old folders of schoolwork, and I don't know how accurate this is, but there was like one thing in like the fifth grade we were studying slavery, and I did a report on Harriet Tubman, and I wrote this letter or this like thing on the back that was like, I chose Harriet Tubman because I can relate to her because I get bossed around like I'm the slave in my house all the time.
Oh, you're like, yep, me and Harriet Tubman.
Yeah,
Like,
me and Harriet Tubman are tight. I really feel her. I really
I,
relate.
I
I
know
also feel
exactly.
like I'm just a slave in my house.
Oh my God.
Um, but anyway, yeah.
So
Let's
let's okay, so we have talked
wait, hold on. Before you go on, the only other thing I wanted to mention was, do you remember the UNICEF boxes that we had to bring trick-or-treating?
yes.
So that is actually one thing that I do think. So for the listeners, basically there was these little cardboard orange boxes that we had to put together that were coin boxes. And when we went to go collect candy, we had to also bring the box to ask these people that were trick-or-treating from for money
Yeah, for
for them
UNICEF, which
to
we didn't even
donate to
choose.
UNICEF.
Like, what if they said everyone can choose their own charity? No, it's like UNICEF is what we're doing. We're all in on
I thought
UNICEF.
that was such a funny, like, that we were like made to solicit during it. We couldn't just have Halloween be
Fun.
about us. We had to have
Well,
it be about like
I think that's the thing is like I think you're right that I had a lot coming in hot with that mentality of, being raised, but also that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't think our fellowship was front loading the joy,
right,
like think of the dirge we just had,
right.
it was kind of
But
like,
I agree. I do think they were probably better than a lot of more traditional institutions. And the only thing I will say to defend them, maybe so to speak, is the fact that Unitarianism teaches in Sunday school about different religions, and we got to visit different congregations and learn about different religions. We went to a Quaker institution,
oh,
we went to
yeah.
and so I felt lucky in the sense that there was not like a uh, um, we weren't dictated that this is the way, the truth, and the light. It was, very much choose for yourself. But it didn't help. Both my parents were pretty much atheists, so like I didn't get a lot of like emotional, spiritual nurturance at home of that
Right.
there's a loving presence that's here watching over you, which I wish that I had because I had to discover that later on my own.
Well,
But
I agree with that. I'm not arguing that
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean that's what I do like about Unitarianism, and I've actually found it in another institution too that does have more of the spirituality and teachings from, different religions and stuff. But yeah, it's just sort of the uh I don't know, putting yourself I didn't think I was allowed to put my own needs first, kind of like
yeah,
that Halloween thing, right? It's like, oh,
yeah,
I can't just have candy and have a fun night. I also have to include this other thing, you
yeah.
know?
I just think I do think for you that was also ingrained so much in your childhood with expectations and dance, and I mean,
Yeah.
I think that really heavy at home. But yeah, yeah. I do. It's funny that I do appreciate more of a formal church environment. I want to get dressed up for church. It was like not, we didn't go to church where you get dressed up. It was like very casual.
Oh, yeah.
I was not wearing my Sunday best, and I'm like, if I'm going to go to church, girl, if I'm going to be in the house of God, so to speak, like I'm going to put my best shoes on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Make it a
so
ritual, make it a
yeah,
real
exactly.
thing.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so we Juniper Media's it's your thing, it's in your zone of genius. It's a way of marketing, getting the word out, but in a method that is very, very relatable, stories we would not normally hear, things like that. Correct?
Yeah, and I think that, I'll just say, I can throw stats out there, but I'm sure a lot of people are aware we are in unprecedented levels of disconnectivity in society. High levels of depression, high levels of suicide, high levels of addiction to social media, high levels of people not feeling authentically connected. And so I think that we really provide that in the kind of work that we do, whether we're producing a full-fledged commercial or video for your website or social media campaign, or we're just finding those stories and then your team has some kind of internal department that they want to film and produce or do an editorial or a photography campaign. But I think it really breeds a lot of people feel connected, and I think
Right.
that's harder to achieve these days through the alternative options.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I mean, I've talked with the Chicago Police Department briefly about doing kind of an internal campaign on mental health, and I've talked about other stuff too. But yeah, I mean that's like such a important thing for me, especially because mental health and suicide has unfortunately touched my own family, and yeah, and so we are really passionate about
I,
content that makes an impact.
I have recently that subject of communication, or I'm sorry, community and connection. Community and connection do equal communication. That's why I said that. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Okay.
mm-hmm.
Anywho, um, as well, because of, our training, we have in person, we have online. In person is by and large so much more impactful for people. I swore up and down I'd never have a brick and mortar space, but we just rented out the space for all our businesses, including our YFFR filming studio. I'm going to hold some donation yoga classes there, as well as our offices, and just the community that we're building here in this new town we're in. I'm like, oh my God, that's right. It like fills you up. So I think I love automations online. I love AI. I love all of that. I think it's only going to help us. And we still have to, that's never going to go away, the need for that heart to heart connection.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you and I have talked a lot about how we can work together
Mm-hmm.
because obviously with the demographic I work with, there are tons of great stories to tell. You're a storyteller through
Mm-hmm.
media. How can we do this? And one of the ways we've been thinking about is documenting one of our 5-day trainings, right? And
Yeah.
really following a couple specific people. And when our folks hear this, if they have ideas, I'd love to hear them too. Like, what would you like to see? What would you like to see from Wi-Fi? What are you curious about? Are you curious of a couple people's journey from having no tools for mental health to then being trained in our tools and what their life looks like. So what would you like to see? Like when you think, okay, here I have for you people and stories.
Mhm.
What would you like what would you like the because we're doing this because X? What would the
Yeah.
why be?
Yeah, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is, we talked a little bit about following a couple of different people, and I think showing a couple of different perspectives. Why do people choose this industry? How do they get there? And then, whether it's like a female veteran who, is now an EMT, or, someone who can show issues on like a reservation on a Native American, community, uh, showing the different faces of first responders that we just don't think about, and think about who, someone who's maybe a female police officer in a majority male, department. Those like small details really make a difference in telling a story and making people capture their attention and having them be, oh, this is really unique. This is interesting. This is not just, the challenge for us that I think is really exciting is also, not demystifying, but speaking through the bias of what yoga is. This is not like a bunch of women in yoga pants, or Lululemon, where they're not all like going with their facial mist after to get their pumpkin spice lattes. No hater against
Yeah,
pumpkin.
listen, Starbucks, if you want to sponsor us, no
Yeah,
hate on those
no hate.
PSLs. I
No
know
hate.
you're getting
I
one.
do like it. Though I am a big fan of mud water for anyone out there who's a mud water fan. I make my own mud water concoction. For anyone who doesn't know, it's like a coffee alternative. It's like a
Shut up.
chimes.
Okay, just stop. No one wants to hear about your mushroom shit, okay? And I kid because I actually have mushroom,
Yeah,
alternative coffee that just came in. So I kid.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, but those stories of people who, I mean, number one, are willing to. Our job is to create a safe space for people to feel comfortable, but you have to be able to let us into your life. That means we're going to be with you and your.
Ability.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be with you, in your day, talking about what are the challenges you're having. Um, I've done a lot of my own healing work over the last 20 years. So speaking about somatic healing, speaking about, what are those, how does the trauma that you experience either from before you got on the job or since you have compassion fatigue, how does that show up? And I think first step getting into that, but then getting into how that affects different populations differently. How does it affect women differently? How does it affect person of color differently? How does it affect someone who as a I mean, the park ranger angle is fascinating. That's not something people think about, I don't think. Um, so I think that's really interesting that we want to learn more about. Obviously, then from a production perspective, how to articulate what you do in a way that's concise enough that doesn't end up becoming like an explainer video. Uh, but also, we take the important, communicate the important things in a way that still holds attention. I mean, whether you're talking about journalism or marketing, it's all competing for getting and then holding someone's attention, especially now in this day of, doom scrolling and addiction to, all those things, right? That's what you have to be really good at. And that means blending the entertaining with the informative and making it all 100% integrous. I mean, that's the value add that we have that's unique to a lot of other marketing agencies or creative agencies. It's like we really are story first, integrity first of, what we're doing and wanting to make sure that's really accurate. So yeah, and I think for what the like I said before, like those challenges, what are the breakthroughs? What do those breakthroughs look like? You and I talked about like it's not, we also don't want to just like tell a happy ending that you can wrap up with a bow, um, really documenting things as they are and making it realistic is important.
Yeah, and our biggest hurdle, and I tell this to my people that I train as instructors, 90, oh, I did hear this one time that said 80% of what you love is boring, meaning that say you love to travel. 80% of traveling is getting on the computer, booking the flight, packing the bag, all this stuff to then finally travel and get to where you're going. So, 80 to 90% of being a YFR instructor is changing misconceptions, debunking assumptions, things like that.
Yeah.
And when you finally get to actual actually teaching and you've changed the minds of the folks so they know why they're there and you have some good classes, that's the fun part, but it really is the smallest, percentage of what you're spending your time on. So to be able to, and I can say it till my face is blue, but then Eric, as a firefighter, says the same thing, and people believe him because he is from that
Mhm.
industry. So to be able to showcase people's stories, see the real transformation, what you said about not it being a teaching thing or something, or how, I forgot how you put it, but um we wouldn't have to, because you would just see them go through the training and you would
Yeah.
see how it's different. Um, so I think that there is a lot of potential there, but I would like whoever's listening to this, if you're pinging, right? Like, oh my gosh, I know the perfect person, or I'm the perfect person, or this or that. Like, if we're gonna do this, I want to do it right. And I want it to be what, people would like to get out there. And also, we have so many people who are commanders of agencies who listen to this podcast. And if you're like, I would like to tell my community our story of our agency, or something like that. I mean, I think you would be such a good fit to to do that and to bring up and enhance community relations.
Yeah.
So I think that I want to make sure that my audience knows how to contact you. And I mean, what some questions I could hear them saying is like, how long was of it, like 2 minutes, 30 minutes? Like, what would you recommend and things like
Yeah.
that? And so if you want to give a quick synopsis of if an agency came to you and said, hey, I want to do a video for our community that shows that how about this? Shows that we have made a huge commitment to the mental health of our officers.
Yeah.
Recommend. What would you say?
Yeah. I think so. The longest video we would ever recommend doing is 6 minutes. And unless you wanted to do an actual like documentary, like a 30-minute
Right.
documentary that we submit to film festivals and stuff like that. But the cool thing about doing a 6-minute video, which you don't have to do, you could do a 2-minute video, is that we would do cut downs, meaning that we would do a 30-second cut for social media so that you could share the words that you get people, or you could, do a minute cut for YouTube. So we can do different edits basically of that so that people who we know need that sizzle reel or that trailer to go watch the full thing. And then with that too, like we can provide, great copy. We can write, a paragraph that we put in social media or on your website. We can do we can take stills from the things that we shoot and then create those into photos that you can put in marketing material.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of ways that you can do a lot with the content or the subject matter that we focus on.
And I think that this would be really good for recruitment, to
Mhm.
get
Oh
people,
yeah.
especially because recruitment is really down, which means they have to recruit folks who would not normally be recruited. And
Yeah.
then you have folks that you would not normally put out on the streets, protecting the streets, protecting the streets. So we got to
I've
get.
seen that here in New York. Yeah, even that's been an issue here. Yeah.
Yeah, so we really have to get those good folks into these good positions. So I think recruitment would be great. Maybe internally, like another thing is changing the culture inside the department. So if we want folks to take advantage of yoga and, things like that, then there needs to be a communication inside an agency that, hey, our culture's changing and it's not going to be stigmatized anymore to do all of this stuff. In fact, if you're not doing it, this is what I always tell people, if you're not doing proactive resilience training, you are irresponsible. That
Mhm.
needs to be the culture that we're going to make that the negative, that you're not taking advantage of it. So even an internal thing to change the culture, there's so many avenues of using this to capture people's attention and starting to turn that boat, right? Turn the wheel of how people see and think certain situations.
Yeah,
And
and I'll just say, sorry,
no, go ahead.
I'll just say as a civilian out in the wild, so to speak, there's not a ton, I'm not hearing a ton about, it was like Black Lives Matter, George Floyd passed away, Black Lives Matter exploded. There was a ton of obviously negative press about police brutality, and I'm just not, and I think I'm sure it is happening. I'm not hearing a lot of what's happening inside, the amazing things that are happening inside these organizations to create change, which takes time,
Mhm.
and I just think there's so many opportunities to tell those stories,
Yeah.
and tell them in an imperfect way, because we also don't want to be, something we deal with in our industry is like, you call it rainbow washing. When you're trying to wash something as pride, everyone explodes with rainbow flags 1 month a year, and then they go back to, being normal. Or greenwashing, pretending that they're being, amazing with sustainability and not doing that much about it. We're not about trying to pretend anything's perfect, but just, I think that there's a lot of really cool, real, authentic, imperfect stories that we can tell, that
Yep.
actually the imperfection is what also develops trust, because we know you're not trying to, wipe everything clean or say everything's better.
Right.
Um, and yeah, just a lot of opportunities for us to make a difference in those kinds of departments.
Yeah. Well, very cool. So, list, we're going to put it in show notes, but list everywhere people can find you, because I can imagine a lot of folks are saying like, or even like, gosh, just for people could talk to you about anything, like even a captain of a crew who wants to just make their small crew different. So how can people get in touch with you to start talking about possibilities?
Yeah, so our website, junipermedia.com, or juniper-media.com, has a contact page. We'll go directly to my personal, or my specific inbox. You can also just email me, Madeline at juniper-media.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can, I think I'm the only Madeline Moitozo out there. Moitozo is also not a common name, so.
Moitozo.
Yep, Moitozo. When I was a little kid, my dad taught me how to say my name by saying that it rhymes with toy bozo, but it's
Wait,
Moitozo.
bozo?
Yeah, like Bozo the Clown. That's a very Larryism, like a very my
Yes.
thing would have
Yeah.
said.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, Madeline Moitozo, Moitozo. I'm on Instagram. Yeah, Juniper Media. I do believe now, if you just Google Juniper Media, we're pretty much the same first ones that pop up.
Have to do it in incognito.
Yeah, oh yeah, good call. I was like, I don't know if
Circling back to the Google search button that
yeah,
we started
exactly.
with.
Let's see what happens. Juniper Media. Hey, we're the first that comes up. Isn't that fun? And our uh Instagram also comes up, and then yeah, and then our LinkedIn shows like that. So easy to find. We'd love to talk to folks. I have such a commitment to mental health, and so much respect for, I think I told you this, Olivia. I had my own personal experience with first responders a couple months ago. God bless New York firefighters and their incredible accents. So they're all from Staten Island, for the most part, or the Bronx. But I was walking home from the subway, and a elderly man, like not too far in front of me, he passed out, he fell back and hit his head. And I stayed with a bunch of us, well, God bless New Yorkers too, right? We all circled around and stayed with him until the fire department got there. And then I was already squatting down holding his hand, because we didn't want him to be alone. And so I was holding his hand, and while the guys were initially treating him, and so I was like really like nose to nose with these other firefighters who are, just being so gentle with him. And but they're also, I was saying, it was like such an attractive quality, because they're also strong and like safe, and like they got it handled, and they know what to do, and everything was so seamless, and they were all calm, and just this energy of safety and ground and protection. And I was, yeah,
Well,
like
this
I
goes
my
back
little
to what
cry.
we were talking about, that balance of the feminine and masculine energy. They were
Yeah.
able to be sweet, but also take control of the situation. And also because that is typically, especially for firefighters, everyone loves firefighters. And they are that way. They are incredible folks, and which is why I married one. But that also goes back to that perception that we don't realize they're humans that get impacted by horrible situations they see every day, and then they have to keep living their lives without the tool of how to process that.
And then
um
a lot of them coping not in healthy ways with substance abuse, or,
yeah,
like
because
you
they aren't given
talked
any
about.
other choice. They aren't
Right.
given the training how to do it. That's what we do, is we give
Right.
the training, seeing the trauma, the death, the loss, the destruction that they are going to see every day is inevitable, and they have to have training for the longevity and sustainability.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's just they're good people of service their whole life, and they don't get to enjoy their own life, and it's just not fair, you
Yeah.
know? So yes. So anyone listening, if you have an idea of what kind of video you would like to see YFFR make and the stories that you'd like us to tell, please also let us know. So Madeline Syambra Moitozo.
Yeah.
Great to interview
That part.
you. And I'll end with one last story about us is one of our fave. There's several. Well, oh my gosh, there's several. Like we'll have to save the middle of the night pie eating for
Oh,
another time.
epic.
But I did the wheelbarrow situation. There was a hill at the side of my house, and I put her in the wheelbarrow. And
Let's talk about how old we were. I must have been like no older than 6 or
no
7.
older, yeah. And so that would
So it
have
means
made
we were like 9 or 10.
yeah. And I guess my intention was to have you go for a ride or it'd be fun to push you down this hill in this wheelbarrow. But was it a three-legged wheelbarrow? Like, I think it was a three-legged wheelbarrow. So it started to catch speed.
I don't think you intended to let go of it. I think that's what happened. Yeah. You
Okay.
let go.
I did let go, obviously, but I thought it would be fun or I didn't mean to or something. But I see you were facing me, the wheelbarrow's catching speed down this hill. And I just remember you used to call me Livia. And you, Livia, just yelling and it's going faster and I start running after it. But because it's a three-legged thing, it flipped over and you were underneath the wheelbarrow and there was no movement. And I was like writing your eulogy, like my eulogy for your obituary in my head. I was like, I killed my friend. And luckily I opened the wheelbarrow and you were giggling,
Unscathed.
unscathed with a great story.
I remember that very well. That talk about guardian angels. You and I talk about spirituality a lot. There was definitely a guardian angel because it like gently placed me underneath it in the dirt.
I don't know how that even happened, that it just went boop. Um,
So
yeah, but anyway. Well, okay, this has been a blast,
uh-huh.
and I look forward to calling you in 5 minutes to talk about personal friend stuff.
Yeah, can't wait. So,
All right, I'll see you soon, my friend.
bye.
Hey, before we go, I want to remind you that training your mental and physical health is incredibly important, especially for those working in high stress jobs like first responders.
And if you're interested in learning more about yoga for first responders, visit yogaforfirstresponders.org for our on-demand training app, online course platform, in-person training, and more.
Like this podcast, subscribe, and give us a great review. We are so happy to have you part of the YFFR mission.